Ladies and gentlemen, those are the headlines. You're watching Rush Hour with me, Sumita Karir. Our top story this hour: when Pakistan's Army Chief General Asim Munir's anti-India remarks in the United States has attracted widespread criticism. From getting called as the Osama bin Laden in a suit to getting slammed by India, Munir's comments have come under attack and scrutiny, with former Pentagon official condemning Munir. And quite rightly so. So amidst tariff tensions between India and the United States, Munir's comments have complicated the overall situation. Michael Kugelman, a senior fellow in Asia of Asia Pacific Foundation, joins to discuss more around this particular development and surrounding developments that are related to India-US ties. Thank you very much, Michael, for joining us here on ET Now. United States flirtations with Pakistan, Pakistan's nuclear blackmail. Would you say that it's a dangerous place for the United States to be in, with old fault lines perhaps being drawn once again, and given the fact that one of its own called Asim Munir Osama bin Laden in a suit?
Yeah, I mean, these comments that the Army chief made could certainly be seen as very inflammatory. I think it is important to consider the context that these remarks, as I understand it, were made in a private setting, an off-the-record setting, and his words were leaked to the Indian media. And it's interesting that Pakistan's narrative, particularly since Operation Sindoor, is that Pakistan is the cause for peace and that India is the aggressor. And these comments would seem to fly in the face of that narrative. When you're making what sound like nuclear threats, that doesn't sound like you're a cause for peace. I think that these comments, in addition to being the saber rattling, the nuclear saber rattling that the Indian government indicated in its response, I think it also reflects just how concerned Pakistanis across the board are about India's decision to hold the Indus Waters Treaty in abeyance, because he was speaking in that context, as I understand it. So I think that's important context as well. But yeah, I mean, given what else has been happening in U.S.-India relations over the last few months, it's a very difficult moment. This latest episode, particularly because these comments were made in the United States, certainly is not going to help the cause of this troubled relationship right now.
Absolutely, Michael, but let me go back to the point that you made. You talked about the point about context, the fact that these remarks were made in a closed-door setting, but isn't backing Pakistan, whose soil has harbored terrorists for the longest time, wouldn't that damage the United States' credibility in its fight against extremism and the stance that Donald Trump famously takes against war?
Well, I mean, as you know, I think that the Trump administration, I know that the Trump administration views Pakistan not as a source of the problem when it comes to terrorism, but part of the solution. I mean, we've seen President Trump publicly thank Pakistan for helping track down an Islamic State Khorasan terrorist. I mean, he did that in his first joint address to Congress soon after he returned to power. There's going to be a counterterrorism dialogue between the two countries sometime in the coming weeks. And indeed, we know that the U.S. designated the BLA as a terrorist outfit. That has been one of the groups that most threatens Pakistan of late. So I think that things are very different now in this relationship than they were in previous years, when U.S. governments did try to do what they could to pressure Pakistan to address this terrorist infrastructure inside Pakistan. I'm not sure if the Trump administration will want to focus on that, especially because the Trump administration, I think, largely will see its relationship through a commercial lens. It wants to focus on business opportunities and critical minerals and crypto and things like that.
Right, Michael. In fact, the latest news around BLA getting a terror attack, that, of course, is yet another support extension that's been given by the Trump administration to Pakistan. But does Trump actually have a strategy on Pakistan, or is he just driven by the whimsical side of his personality?
I do think that it's pretty much the latter. I think that, or I know that he looks at foreign policy and diplomacy not through a strategic lens, but more through a rigidly transactional and indeed a commercial lens. My understanding is that there has not been a formal policy review toward Pakistan and the U.S. government for quite some time. I hope there might be one soon. But yeah, at this point, so far as I know, neither President Trump nor his broader administration has a strategy for Pakistan. I think it's more about being very tactical and looking to capitalize on opportunities that it believes Pakistan offers. And those opportunities include, from the administration's perspective, tapping into critical minerals, engaging on crypto issues, working together, albeit in a narrow context, on counterterrorism issues. But I do not think that there's a clear strategy.
So if there is no strategy, would you say that there might be some sort of quid pro quo involved, some sort of, personal interest involved from the side of Donald Trump?
Well, I mean, as I said before, he looks at foreign policy through a commercial lens, and I think that he is hoping that there could be opportunities that help advance U.S. economic interests, such as tapping into those critical minerals and crypto and so on. And we know that some members of his family have engaged quite closely with Pakistan on crypto issues. So I think that that's where the quid pro quo is. But in terms of what Pakistan gets out of this, certainly Pakistan would like more. I think that Pakistan, particularly the generals, would like the U.S. to unfreeze the security assistance to Pakistan that's been frozen since President Trump himself made that decision early on in his first term. I think the Pakistanis would like to have a stronger counterterrorism cooperation that would include arms, more arms coming in, more money. I don't think the Trump administration would want to do that, quite frankly, but I think the Pakistanis are looking for more.
Right. Right, and that's obviously, anti-America, contrary to what Donald Trump has been stating. But Michael, let me also draw your attention to some other geopolitical developments that are happening, key geopolitical developments which will have wide-ranging ramifications. Most importantly, the Trump-Putin talks that are expected to happen on August the 15th. Now, there is still some disagreement about the United States and Putin on whether Zelensky should come for this meeting in these talks or not. Do you expect a realistic path to truce on August 15th? And what is the kind of an impact that the outcome of these talks is going to have on US-India deal talks?
Well, I mean, not an expert on Russia. My sense is it will take a lot to get Putin to agree to stop fighting. It would take a lot to get Zelensky to agree to stop fighting. We know that Trump has wanted this outcome for quite some time. I do think, to your second question, these talks between Trump and Putin and perhaps Zelensky are very closely linked to the fate of U.S. tariffs on India and U.S.-India relations. It's very clear that President Trump has injected geopolitics into his tariff policies, and he's trying to pressure Russia to agree to stop fighting by trying to pressure Russia's closest commercial partners to back away from Russia. This is of course, why he imposed tariffs on the latest tariffs on India. So if they do get a deal, if they do agree to stop fighting, or if they agree to a ceasefire, that could take the heat off India, I think. There's a good chance that it could take the heat off India, and perhaps the 25% tariffs, those latter 25% tariffs, could be reduced, if not eliminated, because Trump then wouldn't be so upset and unhappy about his inability to get Russia to agree to stop fighting, which has been one of his first priorities since he became president for the second time.
Right, Michael. In fact, that's what, many here in India are also pinning their hopes on. But even if a deal is decided or is arrived at between the United States and Russia as far as stopping the war in Russia and Ukraine is concerned, many experts say that, the cut in tariffs would be to the tune of 25%, which essentially means that we go back to the 25% tariffs that were imposed, by the United States. Would that be a win for India? Should that be a win for India, given baseline tariffs were at 10%?
I mean, it would be a win, but Sumita, there's still the fact that even if it's only those 25% tariffs, not 50%, those would still be higher than the tariffs put on Pakistan, Bangladesh, Vietnam, and key economic competitors of India's, other countries that send a lot of exports, including textile exports, to the United States. So India would still be disadvantaged, but certainly would still be a victory for India, and particularly if Prime Minister Modi's own efforts through his own outreach to Putin and Zelensky to try to push them to stop fighting pay off as well through a ceasefire. So I think in that sense, the Indian government would deserve some credit for moving the needle forward toward getting the Russians and the Ukrainians to agree to stop fighting.
Right. Michael, let me also draw your attention to, yet another story that's playing out in Asia. Well, China has been given a 90-day reprieve by the United States once again. Do you have faith in these extensions by the United States? Because there's still no concrete deal that's been signed between the two sides.
This is very hard to predict, President Trump. We don't know what's coming. I mean, he seems to have a soft spot for China. And quite frankly, I think he wants to be very careful with China. I think he respects the strength of China's economy and does not want to do anything with China, including impose sky-high tariffs on China that, in his view, could actually hurt the U.S. economy. But I do think that he is committed. It seems like he's committed to having this tariff. Of course, it would be nice from India's perspective that there could be a tariff pause in India's case as well. But it's just very difficult to know what the president will do. I mean, of course, his original reciprocal tariffs announced back in April, those got a pause, which surprised quite a few folks. So, there could be more pauses down the road, but it's just really hard to know with this president.
Absolutely. Difficult to know whether there's going to be a final deal between the United States and China, given the fact that, the president has been very cautious so far as dealing with China. Definitely, it's more about strategic dominance and less about economics, seemingly. But one final question, Michael, before we let you go, and let me draw your attention to Professor Jeffrey Sachs, who recently in an interview stated that India is not going to reap long-term security by siding with the United States in the quad against China. Would you agree? And to what extent can India keep its tilt towards China, given China's doublespeak in just the recent past?
I mean, so long as the U.S. and India continue to view China as a strategic competitor and indeed a strategic threat, I think there's a strategic soundness to the U.S.-India relationship. Certainly, there have been those in Washington that feel that the U.S. has not gotten enough from India, and it's from a security perspective. But let's be very clear: India has evolved into a net security provider, a term that's used in Washington. It's sending missiles to the Philippines. It's looking to send missiles to Indonesia and several other states in the Indo-Pacific that would presumably be used to counter China. We've also seen India's Navy operating quite actively in the waters of the Middle East to try to help ships threatened by pirates and Houthi rebels. This has happened over the last few years. So India clearly has the capacity to be a net security provider. So I think it's a matter of reconciling that capacity of India's with U.S. strategic goals, figuring out how the two sides can work together, leverage that capacity of India to move forward. But of course, with the relationship in the deep crisis it is now, it's not the time to be having those conversations. The focus has to be getting on the relationship back on track.
Absolutely. And that's where India needs to tread very, very cautiously with the United States and, of course, with China as well. Thank you very much, Michael, on that note for joining us and speaking to us here on all of these geopolitical matters. Meanwhile,